Hey you. Yeah, you. The one who's been holding it together, but barely. The one who's trying to be everything for everyone, but is quietly wondering, where do I fit in? Welcome to the Thy Selfies Podcast. This is your 10-minute pocket of truth, softness, and strength. I'm Melissa, a woman who's been through the mess, and the founder of Thy Selfies. And this podcast, it's for us. Every weekday, I'm showing up to share the real stuff. The doubts, the breakthroughs, the things I wish someone told me sooner. Because loving yourself isn't always bubble baths and affirmations. It's crying in your car and still choosing to show up. It's unlearning the lies and deciding you're worthy anyway. It's being human and being holy in the same breath. So if you're ready to stop performing, to stop shrinking, and to finally feel seen, this podcast is your daily permission slip to slow down, to rise up, and to come home to yourself. Hey, beautiful humans. Quick reality check. How many of you are currently trying to out-hustle machine? Anyone else feeling like you're in a bizarre competition with AI, algorithms, and automation, desperately trying to prove that human effort still matters by working twice as hard? Here's a plot twist that's going to blow your mind. What if the future isn't about working harder than the machines, but about working smarter with them? I know. Your productivity obsessed brain just screamed, but if I'm not hustling 24/7, how will I stay relevant? And honestly, that question is exactly why you're probably exhausted, overwhelmed, and secretly wondering if all this grinding is actually getting you anywhere. So today we're talking about the death of hustle culture and the birth of something I call algorithmic partnership. It's where you stop trying to be a human robot and you start leveraging both technology and your own intuition to create results that feel sustainable instead of soul crushing. I'm Melissa, and this is the Love Thy Selfies podcast. Where we trade burnout for breakthrough, one intelligent choice at a time. Get ready to discover why the most successful people in 2025 aren't the hardest workers. They are the smartest collaborators. Let me tell you about the day I realized I was losing a war I never signed up to fight. It's 3 a.m. and I'm sitting in my kitchen, laptop open, furiously trying to manually schedule 2 weeks worth of social media posts because I had convinced myself that using automation tools was cheating or somehow less authentic. My eyes were burning, my back was screaming, and I was having a full-blown existential crisis over whether my Instagram captions were engaging enough to compete with whatever the algorithm gods demanded that week. And then my phone buzzed with a notification from a competitor who had just launched a gorgeous campaign that would have taken me weeks to create. They had done it in 3 hours using AI tools, and I had been too proud or too scared to learn. And in that moment, sitting there at 3 a.m. like some kind of content creation martyr, I realized that I wasn't being authentic or hardworking. I was being stubborn, and I was clinging to an outdated model of success that equated suffering with value, or hours worked with worth created. The next day, I made a decision that changed everything, and instead of asking, how can I work harder? I started asking, how can I work in partnership with the tools available to me? And instead of trying to outproduce machines, I decided to outthink the process entirely. I spent an afternoon learning how to use AI for research, automation tools for scheduling, and data analytics to understand what was actually working instead of guessing. That shift didn't just save me time, it saved my sanity, and ironically, it's made my work more creative and authentic, not less. But here's the real plot twist. The biggest breakthrough wasn't learning to trust the tools. It was learning to trust myself enough to know when to use them and when to rely on pure human intuition. It turns out that the magic happens when you combine algorithmic efficiency with human wisdom, not when you try to replace one with the other. So let's talk about why your brain is probably freaking out about this whole working with algorithms thing. Because the psychology behind our resistance to technological partnership is fascinating and totally understandable. First up, cognitive load theory. Your brain has a finite amount of processing power. kind of like RAM in a computer. And when you're manually doing tasks that could be automated, you are essentially running background programs that eat up your mental energy for higher level thinking like strategy, creativity, and problem solving. Dr. John Sweller's research shows that reducing extraneous cognitive load dramatically improves performance and innovation. Translation? When you stop wasting brain power on repetitive tasks, you free up mental space for the kind of thinking that actually creates value. And then there's decision fatigue, the deteriorating quality of decisions made after a long session of decision making. Steve Jobs wore the same outfit every day, not because he lacked style, but because he understood that preserving mental energy for important decisions was more valuable than optimizing his wardrobe choices. Here's where it gets really interesting. Machine learning algorithms are designed to handle pattern recognition and data processing, exactly the kinds of tasks that drain human cognitive resources. Meanwhile, humans excel at context, creativity, emotional intelligence, and strategic thinking, the things that algorithms can't replace. Neuroscience research on flow states shows that peak performance happens when we're operating in our zone of genius, not when we're forcing ourselves to do things we're naturally bad at. When you're spending hours on tasks that an algorithm can do in minutes, you're literally working against your brain's natural optimization. The trust paradox is also crucial here. Our brains are wired to be suspicious of anything that makes life too easy, because historically, ease could mean danger. But this survival mechanism is now sabotaging our success because it makes us resist tools that could exponentially increase our effectiveness. Research from MIT on human AI collaboration shows that teams that learn to leverage both human intuition and algorithmic processing outperform purely human or purely automated systems by significant margins. The magic isn't in choosing human or machine. It's in orchestrating human and machine intelligence strategically. All right, so how do we make this shift from hustle culture to intelligent collaboration? I've got 5 game-changing strategies that'll revolutionize how you work. First, conduct an energy audit of your current processes. Make a list of everything you do in a typical work week and categorize each task as either uniquely human or could be automated or optimized. Uniquely human tasks include strategy, relationship building, creative problem solving, and intuitive decision making. Everything else, scheduling, data entry. Everything else, scheduling, data entry, basic research, everything else, scheduling, data entry, basic research, competitive content creation is a candidate for algorithmic partnership. Second, learn the 80-20 rule of automation. Don't try to automate everything at once. That's just hustle culture in disguise. Instead, identify the 20% repetitive tasks that are eating 80% of your time and start there. Maybe it's email responses, social media scheduling, or data analysis. Pick one area and master it before moving on. Third, develop what I call the algorithmic intuition, the ability to know when to trust the machine and when to trust your gut. Use algorithms for data gathering and pattern recognition, but reserve final decisions for your human judgment. For example, let AI help you research market trends, but trust your intuition about which opportunities align with your values and vision. Fourth, create human-only zones in your work. These are non-negotiable spaces where you rely purely on your creativity, intuition, and emotional intelligence. Maybe it's brainstorming sessions, client conversations, or strategic planning. Protecting these spaces ensures that you're developing your uniquely human skills while leveraging technology everywhere else. And fifth, shift your identity from doer to orchestrator. Your value isn't in how much you can personally execute. It's in how intelligently you can design systems, make decisions, and create experiences. Think of yourself as a conductor leading an orchestra of human and algorithmic talents, not as a one-person band trying to play every instrument. I want to share a story that completely changed how I think about work, effort, and partnership. There once was a village of potters who prided themselves on making every piece by hand. They would spend weeks crafting individual pots, bowls, and vases, believing that the time and struggle invested made their work more valuable and authentic. One day, a neighboring village introduced pottery wheels and improved kilns, tools that could help potters create more beautiful pieces in less time. But the first village rejected those innovations, insisting that real pottery required suffering, long hours, and doing everything the hard way. Years passed, and the first village's potters grew exhausted, their hands cramped and arthritic from overwork. Meanwhile, the second village's potters, using their tools strategically, had time to experiment with new designs, learn from each other, and even teach pottery to children in their community. A wise potter from the first village finally visited the second village, expecting to find inferior, soulless work. Instead, she discovered pottery that was not only more technically excellent, but also more creative and innovative. "How is this possible?" she asked. "We work so much harder than you do." The master potter smiled and said, "You work harder than your tools. We work in partnerships with ours. The wheel doesn't make us less creative. It frees us to focus on the parts of pottery that only human hands and hearts can accomplish. The kiln doesn't make our work less authentic. It allows us to spend more time on design and less time on temperature control." The visiting potter realized that her village had confused struggle with value, effort with excellence. They had been so busy proving their worth through suffering that they had forgotten their actual purpose, which was creating beautiful, useful pottery. The moral is your worth isn't measured by how hard you work. It's measured by how much value you create. And sometimes the most valuable thing you can do is work smarter, not harder. So let's take a moment to release the chronic tension that comes from trying to compete with machines. Instead of collaborating with them. Because I know that if you've been stuck in hustle mode, your nervous system is probably running on fumes right now. So first, let's acknowledge something revolutionary. You don't have to earn. So first, let's acknowledge something revolutionary. You don't have to earn your worth through exhaustion. And you don't have to prove your value by doing things the hard way. You have permission to work intelligently instead of frantically. So place one hand on your heart and one hand on your belly and take a deep breath. Repeat after me. I am valuable, not because of how much I can endure, but because of how wisely I can create. Breathe in. I release the need to outwork the machines. Breathe out. I embrace the opportunity to outthink the process. Take another deep breath. My creativity, intuition, and strategic thinking are irreplaceable. And release. I choose partnership over competition, intelligence over intensity. Now I want you to imagine your future self. This is the version of you that has learned to work in harmony with technology instead of against it. See this person, relaxed, creative, strategic, making decisions from clarity instead of chaos. They're not working less because they're lazy, they're working smarter because they're wise. So notice how this future self moves through their day. They use tools to handle the mundane so they can focus on the meaningful. They trust algorithms to process data so they can trust their intuition to interpret insights. And they've learned that collaboration, even with machines, is a form of intelligence, not weakness. Let's take 3 more deep breaths and let yourself feel excited about this possibility instead of threatened by it. Remember, you're not being replaced, you are being elevated. The question isn't whether you can compete with AI, it's whether you can learn to dance with it. Now, let's get honest about your relationship with work, effort, and the tools available to you. I'm going to ask you some questions that might challenge beliefs that you've held about productivity and worth. First, what tasks are you currently doing manually that could be automated or optimized? Be honest here. How much of your time is spent on repetitive work that doesn't require your unique human skills? Second, what stories are you telling yourself about using tools or automation? Do you believe it makes your work less authentic, less valuable? Where did these beliefs come from, and are they actually serving you? Have you worked with AI? Because an outcome is only as good as the prompt. And who's in charge of the prompt? People. Third, when you imagine working smarter instead of harder, what comes up for you? Excitement? Fear? Guilt? Notice your emotional response without judgment, because it's giving you really important information about your relationship with ease and efficiency. And fourth, What would you do with your time and energy if the repetitive, draining tasks were handled automatically? What creative projects, strategic thinking, or relationship building would become possible? And here's a big one. How much of your identity is tied to being busy, stressed, or overworked? What would it mean about you as a person if work started feeling easier and more enjoyable? And finally, if you trusted both technology and your own intuition equally, how would your decision-making process change? What becomes possible when you stop trying to do everything yourself and you start orchestrating resources intelligently? Take your time with these questions. They're not just about productivity. They're about reimagining what success looks like in a world where human and artificial intelligence can work together. Let's anchor this with a mantra for the new era of intelligent work. I release the need to prove my worth through struggle. I embrace my role as an intelligent orchestrator of both human and technological resources. My value lies not in how much I can endure, but in how wisely I can create. I choose partnership over competition, strategy over suffering, and intelligence over intensity. Now write that down and let it remind you that working smarter isn't cheating, it's evolving. Okay, beautiful humans, here's what I want you to know as we wrap up today. The future doesn't belong to the hardest workers. It belongs to the smartest collaborators. We are living through the biggest shift in how work gets done since the Industrial Revolution. And just like our ancestors had to learn to work with machines instead of competing against them, we need to learn to work with algorithms instead of being threatened by them. This isn't about becoming lazy or losing your human touch. It's about amplifying your human genius by letting technology handle what it does best so you can focus on what only you can do. Your creativity, intuition, emotional intelligence, and strategic thinking aren't just valuable, they're irreplaceable. But when you spend all your time on tasks that drain those faculties, you're essentially hiding your light under a bushel of busy work. Here's your challenge for this week. Pick one repetitive task that's eating your time and energy and find a way to automate, delegate, or optimize it. Start small. Maybe it's using scheduling tools, AI for research, or templates for common communication. And notice what happens when you free up even a small amount of mental energy for higher level thinking. And here's the thing. This is just the beginning. If today's episode resonated with you and you're ready to completely transform how you approach work and productivity, I've created something special that goes way deeper than what we can cover in a single episode. If you're tired of the hustle and ready to embrace intelligence over intensity, and you want to learn how to thrive in the age of AI instead of just surviving it, check out the show notes for more information. This is the work I'm most excited about because it's not just about changing how you work, it's about changing how you live. Until next time, remember, you're not here to outwork the machines. You're here to outthink the processes. Your future self is waiting for you to make that shift. I'm Melissa, and this has been the Love Thy Selfies podcast. Thank you for being brave enough to evolve, wise enough to adapt, and smart enough to know that working with the future is always better than fighting against it. I'll see you next time. Namaste. I want to thank you so much for coming today. If the episode spoke to your heart, please come back tomorrow. Share it with a friend. We do this every weekday. You can also find me over on Instagram at Love Thy Selfies, where we keep the conversations going. Until then, be gentle with yourself. You're doing better than you think. Just a little note from me to you. I am not a therapist or a licensed expert. I'm just a woman sharing her story, her healing, and the things that have helped along the way. Everything you hear on this podcast and read in my blog, on my course, or in my journal is meant to inspire, not prescribe. Please don't take anything here as medical or mental health advice. If you're struggling, you deserve extra support, so reach out to a professional that you trust. I will be here cheering you on every step of the way.